Good evening, everyone. This is A.L. Johnson with Elevating Men. Thanks for joining us this evening. We've got a very special edition that you're going to enjoy. You're definitely going to enjoy. And so I've got a special guest this evening. We're going to be having a very deep conversation. It's not very often that we're able to talk to someone who has such a depth of perspective on the topics that we talk about. Here at Elevating Men, we're all about uplifting the man, rebuilding the man so that we can rebuild the family and ultimately rebuild our communities. The guest that we have today is the three-time former mayor of Compton, California. He was also the assistant superintendent of schools. He has a very colored history. He's going to give us some background on the gang culture that really permeates our society through the music and television. He was right there at the inception of all of it. And so I want to introduce you really quickly to Mr. Omar Bradley. How you doing today, sir?
Real good, AL. How are you, brother?
Can't complain. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you could be doing anything, but the fact that you were willing to take this time out to be here with us and share your wisdom and your story, your insight is important. It's very important. We want to try to share our experiences. I really believe that when it comes to change in people, we do that through conversation, and we can learn a lot from the experiences of others. And out of everyone that I've ever talked to, I don't know anyone who has more experience that's relevant to the conversations that we have here than you. And so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got a friend of yours, a surprise guest I'm gonna bring on really quick. I think you'll find this face to be familiar. How you doing, Mr. Patton?
What's up, O? What's up, A?
Hey, what's up, Mike?
What's going on, boy? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, brother.
That's my big brother right there, for y'all to know that. Brother from another mother.
Amen.
Right. So as you all saw in the title, he was the former mayor of Compton, California. Mike Patton is the person that introduced me to this brother, gave me some good background and insight. So let's just kind of start at the beginning, and I'll start with you, Mike. Why did you feel that Mr. Bradley would be a good fit for this podcast and what he could bring to the table?
My big brother Omar has come from an era and time where man was trying to find its way, and he didn't stay and allow things in the city stand in his way. He took the advantage of what God had given him and got his education. A man of integrity, a man of character, even though like us all had made mistakes along the way, but he rose above now what people try to judge folks by. He stood up on the very point of now taking a city to turn that city around that was now twisted. It was bamboozled. A lot of people were hoodwinked, run amok. They were had by things of the system. In that system, what he did is he went out and got his education so now he could perform his gift adequately to help those people in Compton, in that area. And the point that he made to me, it wasn't the fact, do I love Compton, but does Compton love me? And it's the same sense, do I love them? Well, I show them by my hard work, by my consistency. And so on my way to school, to the elementary school, he was already in junior high school. I used to see them lift weights and spend their time, not gangbanging, but spend their time bettering not only their mind, but bettering their body. So he was an example to thousands of those that were around him. Even though he facilitated with a lot of the rappers and gang members at that time, he stood his ground and stood the very person that he was and is. And so I was always enthralled and moved by how in shape this brother was, how strong he was. And I says, when I grew up and Keith Duncan, I want to be just like him. And so him becoming mayor now proved to me his authenticity of now how much he wanted to make a change with the talents and the education and God's gift that he gave him. He's a sojourner. He's a patriarch in that community 3 times, and so things happen to all of us, but it's not how you start, but it's how you finish.
Amen.
And so I thoroughly, adequately, with all my heart support him And I think he has a whole lot to say that would help change a lot of minds, especially the fact we've already had 37 murders here in Kansas City alone.
Mm.
So I think this is going to be very sufficient. I look forward to hearing it.
And I appreciate you giving us a little bit of that background. And so from you, Mr. Bradley, what was it like growing up in Compton in the 70s? Like, take us back. What was the scene like at that time?
Well, prior to the emergence of the Crips, Compton was no different than Mayberry RFD. Every parent knew every child's name. You couldn't do anything in the community without anticipating that it would get home before you, and your parents would address it. And we were raised in such a manner that we could not disrespect elders. It was highly frowned upon to break into somebody's house. It was definitely taboo to speak out of line with those who were in authority. We were a thriving African-American community, and most of the children that lived there either came from two-parent households, and many of the fathers were veterans. So we came up in a strict disciplinarian environment. When the Crips did come, and they came in around 1972, there just happened to be a street that had a number of young males on it. And those young men, maybe about all total between maybe 4 and 25 years old, had to be about 60 of them. They lived on the street called Piru. And they had the gumption and audacity to fight the Crips back. So that started a war in our community, because the Crips did not come from our neighborhood. They came from neighborhoods that were around us. And it began to change the culture of the community. Guys that would go on to play NFL football were members of the Piru set. Guys that have, you know them. I mean, they've stolen bases in the World Series. They got World Series rings. But if the Crips came, you had to put all that aside. You had to defend the neighborhood. And so when you got caught in that environment, you had very few choices. You could choose to defend the neighborhood full time, and that made you a Piru boy, a blood, or you could try to find other ways to deviate from that path. My way was football. And as Michael stated, one of the things that kept me straight was training for football. I played from the time I was 8 till I was 18 years old. I played in the first Pop Warner championship game for the state title, where the whole team was black, and we won the title. We beat the game 66-6. We were honored by the state governor. And when we were flown to Sacramento and we were in the State House, it made such an impression on me, I could feel the power in the room. And I told myself, one day I'm coming back here, but I'm not coming back as a child. And I did come back.
So you made that decision. You made that decision pretty early. I think it's very interesting how sometimes we'll have a small or brief experience as a child, and then it affects us long term. And so, what was it that you felt when you were in the State House that made you feel that, you know, this is the place for me?
Well, you know, Ronald Reagan was governor then, and that shows you how long ago it was. But when Ronald Reagan shook my hand and handed me a gold football on a gold chain, I understood that if you excel in something, you'll be recognized by something. And so my desire was to play pro football. Unfortunately, sometimes success can be dangerous. And I, you know, my senior year in football, I started first team defensive back and first team tight end. I was on the kickoff team, the kickoff return team, the punt return team, field goal block team, field goal. I was the holder. So I was so deeply involved, at a certain point, I just ran out of gas. After maybe about the 4th game of the season, I just ran out of gas, caught a pass, and just couldn't get down fast enough. Lost my knee. But that was a lesson that I learned. And the lesson that I learned is that you can be too committed to something, and it can be dangerous to be overly committed. Now, it depends on how far you want to take the commitment. I measure that out by people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy. Their commitments was to life and death.
Mm.
And that can be dangerous, especially if you are committed to the wrong thing.
Right. So when we talk about talking about commitment, just kind of touching on that. So you touched on the Piru neighborhood. You had some turmoil between the Crips and the Bloods, and I know we kind of talked a little bit off record. A lot of people have some misconceptions about the Crips, the Bloods, the Piru, and how that all interconnects. And so Piru is a neighborhood, right?
It's the neighborhood.
It's the name of the street. And so essentially the Piru boys were defending against the things that the Crips were doing, at that time. What was the clash in ideologies? Like what was the clash there?
Well, as Michael can attest, we grew up in a middle-class neighborhood. Our grass was green. Our homes were painted. We had 2-car garages and we had 2 cars in the driveway. 3 or 4 bedroom homes, some of them 5. Our parents worked hard, so we had a set culture, a set geography, and a set state of mind. The Crips, for the most part, did not come from communities like that. Many of them came from housing projects, apartment buildings, and homes that were not reflective of the same kind of, I would say, discipline that our parents had. I mean, summer for us was, what are we going to do? Are we going swimming? Are we going to play basketball? Are we going skating? What, we could do anything we wanted to do. Everything in life that was available to white kids was available to us in West Compton. Not so with the Crips. And so when they saw this this diverse kind of image that we had, there was a lot of jealousy and a lot of anger and resentment. And that anger and resentment turned into a motive to attack us. And then when those attacks come, they don't say, well, listen, are you Piru? Or no, you live in that neighborhood, we're going to attack you. And if that happens, then that will weaponize mentally the entire neighborhood. Whereas if you from that neighborhood and you see Crips, you know, hey, listen, time to fight. Now, that's a person who's affiliated to the gang, the neighborhood. Piru was never a gang, but for people to understand, affiliated to the gang, the neighborhood, the set. Then you had guys like Michael and I who, even though we lived there, and if you bothered us, we'd fight you tooth and nail if you were a Crip, because to us, we're not fighting Crips, we're fighting for our lives. Sometimes that would spill into your life in ways you couldn't control. Whereas if you fight somebody back that's a Crip, you can anticipate that they're going to get 6 or 7 more people and they're coming back. Sometimes they're coming back with a pistol, sometimes with a knife. And so since you knew that, since this was programmed into you, you knew to get with your homeboys and say, look, man, I had a fight with a Crip today and I'm sure they're coming back. And what that would do is engender support from cats in the neighborhood that would say, brother, when they come, we got you, we with you.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. So we're doing a little work with a couple community programs, and the basis of it is for us to show young men that there's a different way. And from our conversations, I really learned something, because a lot of times we too easily throw out statements like, boys run to violence because of, a lack of income or resources and things like that. And it's interesting to me that at the beginning of the Piru neighborhood and everything that was going on, it was a middle class neighborhood. And so it wasn't a poverty thing. It was more about protection from a different element. And so can you kind of speak to that mindset, being a young man growing up, that isn't the path that you're looking towards. You're in a middle class neighborhood, but, now you're having to adapt a gang mentality. What was that like?
My mother was a probation officer. My father owned a filling station, full service. He owned 5 homes. They had stock in businesses. They were from the South. They had a different mentality about what the opportunities in California provided, and they took advantage of it. Their major push and pull on us was, you must do well in school. And so when you have parents that are pushing you to do well in school, but you got guys driving by the school shooting 38s at you, you caught in a conundrum. I want to do right, but I don't want to get killed.
Right.
I know the guys who can help defend me, And so I associate with them because it's harder to shoot 7 than it is to shoot 1. But still, through all that, I personally maintain the mindset that I was not going to be the victim of circumstance. I was going to rise above it.
Now,
And so,
ask me that. Let me say, how did you do that? What did you see in the difference in your mindset versus some of the other guys in the neighborhood who got completely pulled in to that lifestyle? What was the difference? How were you able to?
3 things: study, study, study. And I've actually had classes where in college where the teachers would dismiss me and say, I can't teach you anything because I had read the stuff they were handing out before they gave it to me. Church. I grew up in a God-fearing home. I went to church every Sunday. I missed a whole lot of championship basketball and football, singing, bringing in the sheaves. But you were going to learn who God was, and you was going to have a relationship with Christ. That was the ultimate. And the last thing is I had a father that would really put his hands on you. Very rarely, he'd give you 3 chances. But when he asked you, have you lost your mind? That's time to start ducking. Because he knew that you had been raised with a mindset that you were not supposed to do certain things. See, there were certain things in our neighborhood we just didn't do. We didn't write graffiti on the walls. We didn't smoke cigarettes in front of old folks. I mean, just let alone think about lighting up a joint. That would have been out the question. We did not do certain things because we were raised to respect the elders. And if they stopped you, you better stop. And you better say, Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, how are you? Because they would call your parents. And that meant that the sense of community where we grew up was so strong that you could get chastised on any block. And there are 11 blocks in our neighborhood that run north and south, and about 10 more blocks that run east and west. I didn't care where you went in that area. Somebody knew you. They knew your mother and your father. So we had a containment that was our culture. And that provided us with a certain amount of opportunity because we knew what was expected of us. You must do better than your mother and your father. You got to go further than them.
So let's talk about the pivot in all of this because, I feel like gangster rap kind of permeates the entire culture. You look at a Target commercial and they got rap in it, and so that's a huge thing. And during the time that you were coming up, that's really when rap kind of went from, you have, breaking and, all these different things like that. It was a little more lighthearted. And then when it got to a point of maybe being considered gangster rap, you had NWA, but their aggression was really more towards the government and, oppression. But by the early 90s, you had, Death Row, that was kind of the rise of them and all of that. And so it went from aggression towards the system of oppression to aggression towards each other as far as media and music. And so what effect do you feel that media and music has had on our culture?
Well, let me just start off by saying you are correct. Gangster rap was the soundtrack to gangbanging. And many of the things that were spoken of in gangster rap became the things that were happening on the streets. The mentality, the mindset, the hardness. But if you really look at the early gangbangers, Crips and Pirus, they knew each other. They played baseball together. They didn't have a hate for one another. Just because you were Crip, it had to be some kind of incident to spark a retaliation. When gangster rap came in, and mind you, I know them all. I mean, I know them all. I know them all. I spoke over Eazy's body at his funeral. I know Q. I knew Suge very well. I know Quick, DJ Quick. I mean, second to none. I know them all. But the thing that you get from them that you didn't have in my generation was a sense of we knew where we were going ultimately. See, we never thought we were going to get stuck. We knew that banging was it was something that was happening now, but it wouldn't be happening later on because we were all going to mature, grow up, get married, go to college, get a job, raise a family. But you have guys that are from a culture now where they don't have that in the beginning, and therefore how can they look for it, anticipate it in the end because they don't know what they're looking for.
So that
They
was a
don't.
little bit of the difference between the Piru and the Crips. So you all grew up middle class. You had two-parent homes, and so even though you went astray, just like the Bible says, if you train him up in the way he should go, when he's older, he won't depart from it. A lot of you had the mindset that, I'm in the streets now, but there's something greater for me later, and a lot of you pursued that. When we spoke a little bit off camera, you said there was a little different element with the Crips that were warring with y'all in the neighborhood. A lot of them didn't have that family structure, didn't have that guidance, and so that was more of the long-term play for them. Do I have that correct?
The word is hopelessness. They were hopeless, and we could see it in them. I mean, they wore $2 crack crocodac shoe, what are they called, Mike? Croco sacks.
Khakis and
They
Croco
shoes,
sacks.
they shoes literally cost
And,
$3.
and
We wouldn't
Omar, what you said was the point of going too far. You could identify a Crip because he had a red rag. You can identify a blood because he had a red rag and a Crip had a blue rag. So you knew who they were with those Croco sacks and khakis.
Yeah,
and the white T-shirt.
They dressed as though they were underprivileged.
Right.
And we were trying to buy Stacey Adams shoes in high school.
Right.
we were wearing leather coats and $20 hats.
That's right.
And we wore gold and we would come to school sharp. They used to refer to our high school, Centennial High School, as the fashion show.
That's right.
Because we actually would strive to be dressed well, to be to comport ourselves as gentlemen.
That's right.
Now, all that goes out the window when 60 or 70 Crips hop the fence.
That's something.
Now it's time to get it on. And you couldn't run. See, here's the deal. If Michael and I were walking to the library and some Crips came to Centennial's campus and hopped the fence to attack people that lived in our neighborhood, neither one of us would run, because our rule was we cannot run from them. No matter if it's 100 of them and 2 of us, we're going to stand there and fight you. Because the premise was, because we had a nice lifestyle, that we were weak, that we couldn't fight, that we didn't understand strength. And at a certain point in our neighborhood, you can go to any garage any time of the day, and what you would see is middle-class kids buffing iron, hitting the heavy bag, hitting the speed bag, because we wasn't going to tell mom and daddy, hey, the Crips going to come. But when they did come, we had to be able to throw punches at them. And sometimes it turned into worse than that.
And that's interesting to me, because, you have a lot of children today who grow up so privileged, not having to deal with any of the things that you dealt with. I can say that those were things that I had to experience. And so to look at what you were able to turn that into. And so just like a list of your accomplishments, after the whole football thing, you graduated college, 3 degrees. You became the assistant superintendent of schools in your city. You were on the city council board, 3-time mayor. And so how do you go from being in that neighborhood and that environment? I know that you said, studying, church and having a village, to help raise you. But even at that, in those times when you were alone, in your own mental space, what were the things that were kind of going through your mind, and what were you thinking about that really took you out of that situation?
Well, I always knew God had a call on my life. I knew that when I was a little boy. And I knew it because I had seen him save me on multiple occasions. When I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with multiple cancerous tumors in my leg, and they ate through the bone. My leg was broken, and I was going to have my leg amputated. I didn't even know I was going to have it amputated. I went to church that Sunday, and I noticed all the people at church were crying and praying over me. They had a prayer circle, and they laid hands on me. Then they sent me outside with my big brother, Wayne. And I said, man, why is everybody crying? He said, well, they're going to cut your leg off tomorrow. But when we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, let me just take another look, because I want to make sure I got this right. He came back with a lollipop and said, son, you're going home today. Your tumors are not malignant.
Hallelujah.
See,
Hallelujah.
God starts showing me early in my life that he is the master of my life. And that if I kept my hand in his life, it didn't mean I was going to live a perfect life. I was going to make mistakes. And listen, to all of you who say you're believers, you're going to catch just as much hell on this side if you don't follow God's will as you're going to catch on the other side. The difference is on the other side is eternal. Here,
Yeah, sometimes, the pastor I grew up with, he said, God will whoop you sometimes, where your parents didn't, because he sees everything. Now, you did share a story with me, about your transition. And at one point, you got jumped. I'll let you tell your own story, but how did that situation affect you, and how did it change you?
even when I was in college, I was from the hood.
Right.
And if you're from the hood, you're under hood rules. So I went to a liquor store with a couple of guys, and another neighborhood, some bounty hunters, not out of Watts, but some bounty hunters out of the Willowbrook area, called us at the store. They felt like it was their store. And the guys that I was with owed them money for drugs because they knew me and I had a clean reputation of being a good brother and always followed through with whatever I said. The bounty hunters told me I could leave. But as I told you, our neighborhood, you cannot leave your brother. So I had to tell them, well, it's a good day to die because I can't leave these brothers. And they beat me down pretty good. It was more than I could handle. They used pipes and brass knuckles and things like that. I woke up in the hospital maybe about 5 days later. But in that struggle, even while I was blacked out and seeing that white light coming towards me, I asked God to spare me. And the reason why I asked him to spare me was not because of me. I could not bear the thought that my mother was going to have to look at me dead. Because I knew my mother loved me. I knew she put special care in me. And so I asked him to do it for her because I couldn't break my mother's heart like that. My mother had faith in me that I had enough information, knowledge, and culture that I could make the right choices. But when you get caught in a situation and the hood rules apply, the only choice you could make is I got to go down with the hood. So when I came out of that coma, I had a good conversation with God. And I said, listen, I'm ready to do what you asked me to do. And one of the things that he asked me to do was to be a good man, but to be a good leader. And so that motivated me to go back to college. And literally, I went to college with a black eye for a year. That's how I had cerebral edema. My brain was swollen past the size of my skull. I couldn't hear out of my left ear. But I went back to college with a purpose. And then I began to understand why I was there, to prepare for the future.
And you had your future was it got pretty colorful after that. And so just to kind of recap for those of you who are just tuning in, this interview is with Mr. Omar Bradley. He's the 3-time mayor of Compton, California. Very interesting story. And so we're just kind of going through his life. He started off playing football. He grew up in the Piru neighborhood, right at the heights of the Crips and Bloods and the exception of that. And he was able to overcome his circumstances. And he went to college, got 3 degrees. And so now we're at the point where he transitioned into politics. And so from us here, you were elected to city council in 91.
Yes.
Tell me this, what was the landscape of Compton right before you got into city council? Because I'm trying to connect the dots here. I know Death Row started in 91. You became city council in 91. And so what was the city like at that time?
Off the chain. Murder capital of America.
Rodney King.
Compton was the murder capital of America. And what made me run was I was watching television with my 2 children in front of me and my wife, and a little boy named Philip Fisher, who was 2 years old, died in his father's arm. Somebody did a ride by and trying to kill the father, ended up killing the baby. And I'll never forget, I wept for about an hour because all I could see was my son and my daughter in my arms dying. And it hit me and it struck me in such a way that my wife could not stop me from crying. And so she said, why don't you run for mayor? I ran for mayor and I lost at 29 years old. That's when that occurred. I was going to run again in 2 years because the mayor passed. And his son, Walter Tucker, who went on to become the congressman, his supporters said, listen, don't run for mayor, run for council, we'll support you. And that is what happened there. I did win. Now, here's what people need to know. The FBI was after young black men really hard. And they were definitely after Walter. And they followed me for 6 years. And they collected 600 hours of videotape on me. They offered me money multiple times, $50,000, $25,000, contracts illegal because you can't, as a mayor or a council person, have a conflict of interest by representing a company and at the same time representing the city. And they were posed as business people, but they were not. They were federal agents. And they were able to snatch Walter Tucker, who was my immediate superior and a friend, and Councilwoman Patricia Moore, but they couldn't get me. And the reason why they couldn't get me is because I had grown up in Compton, for real. I mean, I hung out with the hoods, and the hoods would tell me, look here, man, if somebody got on a $3,000 suit and some $25 shoes, they the police on me. So when I looked at these business people, I'm looking at them, and they keep wondering why I'm looking under the table. So sometimes hood knowledge is good enough. I did not take the money.
Because so you didn't take the money. You have Death Row starting, they're producing their music. You got the battle going, back and forth between the East and West Coast. There's things going on the street. But with you as mayor, from my research, you were able to lower the crime rate by 80%, or the murder rate. How were you able to do that with everything going on?
Well, there were several things that happened, major events. One, Easy E, who was from a Crip neighborhood, came to do a video to disrespect Dr. Dre. And I talked to Easy for 13 straight hours. After council meeting, I took him in my office. I fed him, and I told him, I said, brother, your mind is as sharp as Malcolm X's, but your message is as dirty as as a fat man's drawers. You got to clean that up, brother, because if you don't clean yourself up from the inside, then the things that you're creating on the outside will overcome you. And unfortunately, they did. I only have one regret with Easy, that when he called for me when he was dying, I didn't go. And the only reason why I could not go is because I felt like I failed him. He was younger than me, and I understood what talking about death all the time brings. It brings death. Live by the sword, die by it. At the same time, Suge is a Piru boy, but he's an East Side Piru. And I understand where he's coming from. He's anti-Crip. But his message was at one point no different than Easy's. So now you got a major record label led up by Crips and a major record label led up by Bloods, and it's accelerating the killing. It's accelerating it. But I know them both. I know Dre, I know Q, I know, I've had to run Ren out of some places, MC Ren. They know me.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember now, I'm still buffing iron. I'm still bench pressing 475 pounds.
Right.
I'm 34, 35 years old, so I'm not scared of any of them. They, gun or not, I will take your gun and beat you over the head with it, son. But because I'm trying to get something to you. You are producing a soundtrack to murder. And it's killing more than the people that the guns are pointed at. Most of the people that were getting killed in Compton were innocent victims. People that were just standing around at parties and caught strays. And I had to bury 9-year-olds and 13 years old. And when I say I had to bury them, I'm saying literally, because most parents are not prepared to bury their child who's 7 or 9.
Right.
They come to me and say, Mr. Mayor, I can't bury my child. And I'd have to grab the money and they say, here, go bury your child. So it was a personal fight for me. And
now,
also,
did you see any difference in the people who were not directly affiliated with either of the record labels, just people on the street who were absorbing the music and absorbing the message? Did you notice any change in the mindset of just people in the city in general? Was it geared more towards violence and gang banging just overall?
Absolutely, because guess what? The Pirus of my era, if you didn't bother them, they didn't bother you. The Pirus of the 90s, if you were wearing blue, they'd shoot you. And the Crips of the 90s, if you were wearing red, they'd shoot you.
And so you feel it was the record labels that accelerated that, or what?
Question that it accelerated it. It's no question that it accelerated it. And it accelerated other things in our community that had no place in our community, which was the denigration of Black females.
So why do you feel the music is so effective in changing our mindset, especially in a negative way?
Well, now I'm going to get kind of intellectual. Please allow me to. The word it comes from the word muse. And if you figure out what the muses are in Greek mythology, they are spirits that influence the minds of men.
Mm.
And so I grew up listening to Please Return Your Love to Me, Girl. But the 7-year-old of the 90s grew up to Itch Better Have My Money. And, you know, it ain't no fun if the homies can't have some. And, you know, I'll bust a cap on you. And so when you put that kind of mindset in a young person,
right,
what does the Bible tell us? Bend the sapling while it's young, so that when it grows old, it won't depart, right?
Right.
So if you put that in a child when it's young, how can it be anything but the seeds you planted?
So what do you say to people? Because some people, they say, well, you know, music is just music. It's entertainment.
Absolutely not.
Not. Okay.
Absolutely not. Music is, of most of the things in society, music is probably the potentially most lethal thing there is. And in fact, there are CIA studies that suggest that there's certain ways that music can manipulate the occipital bone, which is what's sitting at the base of your eardrum, and it can make you feel certain ways. Just like you can listen to a love song and feel loving, you can listen to a killing song and feel like killing. And that's reality. There are books about how the CIA actually studied jazz. And when they found jazz artists who were manipulating to the occipital bone to the extent where the people that were listening to it became militant, they tried to destroy those artists. You can look at the life of John Coltrane, the life of Miles Davis, the life of Billie Holiday. All of those people were constantly followed by high-level intelligence agencies for the purpose of destroying them, because music can bring out the militant propensity in Black people. Remember Public Enemy. Remember how they had, when they did their videos, they got 6,000 or 7,000 Black people marching with them with Malcolm X t-shirts on and throwing up black fists. Well, guess what? If it could make you pro-Black, it could make you anti-Black. And so gangster rap was the propitiation of a negative image of Black people, a denigration of the Black female image, and also a divide and conquer mechanism.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So the music definitely has an effect. And you kind of mentioned the CIA and the FBI. And so how much of this that's put on our community do you feel is, you know, for lack of a better word, a conspiracy, you know, of the government? I've read certain things. It talks about, you know, Crips, that there's a different acronym for that alludes to the government involvement.
Intelligence program.
What was that called again?
Well, see, there was a program to destroy the Black Panther parties. It was called COINTEL program. Okay. But once the Panthers were destroyed, then if you wanted to make sure they don't rise, you have to have another program. And that program would not bring about Black unity. It would bring about Black division. And that division, to a large extent, was created with the emergence of the Crips. See, the Crips were the first gang that began to recruit outside of their own territory. And their recruitment tool was to beat you down.
Okay.
So they forced the Crip identity on you. When they got to Piru, they found some people that already had an identity and wasn't going to take a beating.
Now, how important do you feel it is? Because what I'm hearing here, there was a war of ideologies, but there were men who were willing to stand up and weren't afraid of other men who were trying to, tear down the community. And so, how important do you feel it is for men specifically to take a stand in their communities and make change? Do you feel that it can happen otherwise? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the original Piru boys were boys. They were like 16, 17 years old.
Okay.
But the impression that they left on the boys under them
Mm-hmm.
became what is now known as Piru Code, which when I tell you, you can't run from a fight. And I don't care if it's 20 of them and just you.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stand there because we want to leave the impression that we will not run from you. If you come to get me, I'm going to get one of you. Now, you're going to get me, but I'm going to get one of you. And then the boys that saw that occurring, my story about fighting 16 bounty hunters. You get little boys all, even now that I say, man, you fought 16 cats. I couldn't run. Now, I'm not saying that's intelligent. What I'm saying is the older kids can transpose a mindset and an image on the younger kids that then if it is transposed on them when they're young, it will become, you can't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it.
So
because it's ingrained. It's ingrained at that point.
Absolutely. You know the story about the elephant, right?
No, sir.
Okay. So
if you tie it to a tree.
When you go to a circus,
yeah,
you look at the elephant, and he has a small 12-inch stake planted in the ground,
right,
and a chain tied to the stake, and the chain tied around his neck. Now, of course, that chain can't hold an elephant. But if you've been tying that same stake and that same chain to an elephant when it's a baby, then when the elephant tugs as a baby and tries to get free, he discovers that he can't overcome it. It becomes ingrained in him. And all you got to do is show him that chain and that stake, and he won't move. And this is what Black people are grappling with now. We can't change because it's ingrained in us that we actually have some kind of divide. And the divide that started with Black males, you watch now, you see Black sisters, they don't really want to have anything to do with us. They got a Black female movement, Black girl magic. But you could not find one Black leader, male or female, in the 50s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to 2010, where they said, we're here for the Black women. Martin didn't die for Black men, he died for Black people. Right. Malcolm didn't die for Black men, he died for Black people. Medgar, Marcus, all the super soldiers, and even Phyllis Wheatley and Fannie Lou Hamer and all the great Black women, they weren't fighting for Black feminism, they were fighting for Black rights, period, for Black people. So when something begins to divide and splinter unnaturally, then it creates fissures in other areas of that particular organism, and in our particular case, our race. So when
it's tearing apart the family, it's tearing apart our family structure.
And so therefore it's a war of genocide, because if I've been calling you, excuse my French, a bitch and a hoe on these records for 25 years,
right?
If you go to the club and you dance to that record and you begin to espouse those lyrics, then you become what you say you are. And then the Black woman sees you, and I'm not going to let you treat me like a hoe or a bitch. So therefore there's a level of distrust. And then once that distrust grows, it can be easily manipulated by an outside adversary.
I was just talking to somebody else about that. Like, there's no other culture that you see music that's so detrimental to the listeners. Whenever you listen to even R&B, which is supposed to be the music of love, 90% of the songs are actually about cheating and infidelity and running around on your mate and things like that. And so it appears to be an operation that's intentional, to just destroy the Black family. What do you feel is the reason for that ultimately?
Well, I can tell you what it is. Judas sold out for 30 pieces of silver. And there are a lot of brothers who appear to be gangster this, and they're you're nothing but sellouts. Let me tell you something. You can't make me say something bad about my sister on a record, my mother on a record, my grandmother on a record, my wife on a record, my daughter. And when you talk about one Black woman, you're talking about all of them. But you see, When I grew up, I only had one opportunity over the telephone to call ultimately my wife, but back then she was my girlfriend, out her name. And man, my mother jumped on me like it was high karate, man, like it was kung fu. She said, "Don't
Right.
you talk to that girl like that again. Do you hear me, son? I will beat the daylights out of you. That is a woman, that's a black woman, that's somebody's daughter. Don't you ever speak to her like that." And after my mama got through beating me with her shoe, I got the message. But when did we get to the point where we allow psychologists and sociologists and all these outside people to tell us how to train our children?
Yeah. Yeah.
I could get a whooping by an auntie, a neighbor. Listen, man, I've had situations when I was growing up in Compton, me and my partner riding across the street on our Stingrays, dodging in and out of traffic. Two old people that didn't even know us, brother, scooped us up, threw our bikes in the trunk, and made us tell where we lived. Took
Right.
us and told our mama what they, you know what you boys was doing? And you know what my mother told the lady? "You'll never see him do it again, honey. Don't worry about it. Thank you."
So man, this is interesting to me. So in the 70s, Piru was middle class neighborhood. You had families, mother and father together, raising their children. You had this gang element that came in, and so a lot of that was hidden from the senior members of the community. You guys just kind of did your own thing, kept it to yourself, and so there was a situation where if you went outside, you had the wrong color on. By the time you hit the 90s, you're liable to get shot at, and it stemmed from the music. I find that very interesting. And so here we are in the 90s. You become mayor in 93. You're elected mayor. And so that's 2 years into Death Row's empire. You had Tupac, Suge Knight, everything that was going on with that. And then in 96, Tupac passes away.
Correct.
What changed then? Or did anything change, or did it escalate things? What did that time period look like?
I only had an opportunity to talk to Tupac Shakur for about 5 minutes, and it must have been maybe about 2 months before he died. And he, because he knew who I was, he actually walked up to me, "Mr. Bradley," because they, listen, I'm about 41, 42. He's like in his late 20s, maybe 30s, I think. And he says, "Look, man, I'm trying to get out." And I said, "Look, dude, just get out. Ain't no such thing as trying to get out. You either get out or you don't get out." And I mean, I know Suge well, and I won't speak ill of it, but I will say this: he had a lot of things going on. It was more than just a record company, and it was more than just, you claiming Mob Piru. That's a real thing, and Mob Piru has real enemies. And if you run with Mob Piru, you're gonna catch their enemies, and you're gonna catch their wrath. So that's what happened to Tupac to a large extent. Now, were there deeper controversies that I know about? Yes. Will I talk about them? No, because I don't want to die and I don't want to have to kill anybody.
For sure.
But the bottom line is that yes, the music contributed to the acceleration, and the dope didn't help either. So now you got music that's out of control. You got cocaine that is proliferating like wildfire, and people are making bad decisions. They're making bad decisions, and most of the decisions that they're making are to a certain extent influenced by the culture around them. You're hip to evolution, right?
Yes, sir.
If you climb up hills, you're going to get big calves, right?
Right.
A giraffe used to be a horse until the arm tree started growing taller. When he stretched his neck up over a period of time, his neck got long.
It's adaptation.
If you keep hanging around with people that's talking about killing and selling dope and pimping women, guess what's going to happen to you?
Yeah.
Culture will overcome you. You will evolve. And it takes a person. The only thing that can stop a man from evolving into a monster is the Spirit of God. That's it. Nothing else.
That's real. That's real. We got a question from the audience here. Corey Infamy. Shout out to you, brother. Thanks for tuning in. He asked, outside of poverty, do you believe it was the influx of drugs that was the apex of violence? LA and New York had 1,000+ murders per year before gangster rap. And so he's kind of speaking to the drug aspect of it, possibly overpowering the music. What would you say to that?
Well, you have to understand if you're trying to get a people who are traditionally conservative, that's who black people are. We were Republicans far longer than we were Democrats. We're
Right.
traditionally conservative, conditionally church oriented. So if you're going to convince those people that there is a better life than the life you have, then you're going to need propaganda. The music was the propaganda to make the possibility of a mindset that would sell drugs to your own sister, to
Right.
your
And now he spoke to the poverty piece. He spoke to the poverty piece. So I mean, what was it? Was it poverty or was it just the the gangster mentality? What was it?
well, I was coming to that. You see,
Mhm.
so before there was rap, there was Superfly. And Superfly was a movie that promoted the lifestyle of selling drugs. And even in the Superfly movie, there's a portion where the dope dealers and the militants are going at each other. Well, guess who's going to win? Because you got the FBI destroying the militants. So the dope dealer prevails. And as you promote that lifestyle, Superfly, you're going to make it taking my advice. But if you lose, don't ask no questions why. When you get people that start believing that I can actually live by being a drug dealer, and then you start seeing examples in the community of people who were poor and now they're rich, right? That is another source of education that's not found within a book. I can see people that were in rags now in riches, and I want to be like you. I even see movies about people like you. I see television shows about people like you. And I have examples of you in my community that are thriving. And so that becomes a viable choice. Hey, man, you want to sell some of this dope? How much can I make? Well, if you're making $23 or $24 a day on a hard working job, and I can make $2,500 an hour, which one are you going to choose? If you're not rooted and deeply stabilized in God and with a moral background, you're going to pick dope. Now, the gang simply made it territorialized. In other words, Pirus don't sell dope in Crip neighborhoods, and Crips don't sell dope in Piru neighborhoods. If that happens, there's going to be a greater level of conflict because now I got money and I'm not shooting 38s anymore. I'm shooting Uzis. I got $2,500 to go buy a yak, a AK, a Uzi. So then murder would proliferate, death would proliferate because we're not shooting pea shooters anymore. When I was young, man, when I was 12 and 13, I was getting shot at. But people were shooting at us with 38s. They had 6 bullets to get it right. So if it's 15 or 20 of us running different directions, ain't nobody going to get shot most of the time. And they are already moving in the car. So it's hard to shoot. But if you got an AK-47, all you got to do is point it, bro.
And and speak to what you can. You don't have to get too deep here, but at one point, the police department was found to be corrupt, and it looks like a lot of police officers lost their job. And so I know you can't get too deep into that, but my question really is, as a man who grew up in that neighborhood, kind of seeing everything, what was that whole situation like? Sitting as mayor, and you got all this stuff going on with record labels and the police department, and how did you even keep your sanity through all that?
Well, it was Crippin' and Piru in the police department.
Okay.
There were Crips that were Compton PDs that would roll around with blue rags tied to their antenna.
So it was that blatant.
Well, let me put it to you this way. The mayor that succeeded me came from a Crip neighborhood. And of course, I came from a Piru neighborhood. And I didn't know it until many years later that he and I had got into it when we was kids about him coming out on a Crip bag on me at a football game. Well, I know he doesn't understand. And in my neighborhood, if you Crip on me, I'm not going to back up.
Well,
in fact, I'm going to go into my nut row. I want you to see that I'm not afraid of you, man. I don't care nothing about what you believe or what you think. You dig? That's how I was raised. Let no man fear you and fear no man. So if you start cripping on me, I'm going to start tripping on you. Now, I had no idea this was going to go on until we was grown and in our 40s.
Right.
But he became a cop, and I became the mayor, and then he became a DA. And it was his DA offices that filed charges against me. But there was absolutely no conflict. I mean, I'm running against you as a DA. You're a DA, I'm the mayor. I just got rid of your brother in the whole police department that you belong to. You get charges filed against me, and there's no conflict of interest. Well, here's another hierarchy that black people have to understand.
Right.
If it comes down to a good black man and a bad cop, society will pick a bad cop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because to them, if you're a cop, there's something genuinely good about you when maybe there's nothing good about you. Now, I'm not saying there was nothing good about this brother, because in our later years, you know, when the system came to get him too, I think he began to understand that, you know, you're black, you're not blue, right? And I think he began to see the corruption that I saw when I got rid of the Compton Police Department. But consider this, our city manager's son worked for Death Row. Our head of homicide's son worked for Death Row. Sure grew up next door to them. So I can't say, oh, well, these people were corrupt. I don't have that kind of evidence on me.
Right.
I'm just saying the proximity of the two things bothered me when I was the mayor. And I have literally walked out of championship fights, Mike Tyson fights, and I'm in Vegas and I see Compton PDs everywhere. And I'm trying to figure out what you're doing with your strap in Vegas. There's something wrong about that. Something not right. So you just have to put two and two together for yourself. In my lifetime, brother, I've seen some things that would shock the man in the moon.
I believe.
Yeah. So, you know, and the other thing that I can say that was transformative for me, and I hope this helps the viewer, is that when I became mayor, death and murder was not a stranger to me.
Right.
I mean, I had seen it before.
So do you think that prepared you? You think that kind of prepared you for what was going on at the time of you being mayor?
Two things prepared me. Number one, these guys in my neighborhood, if they heard you ran, they'd come back and get you. They wasn't going to kill you, but they're going to take you outside and put a whooping on you. And they would tell you, you can run from them or you can run from us. Take your choice. But since we live here, you ain't going to get away from us. So I learned not to run from people and not to be afraid of things. Second, man, I had a great fear of God. I feared God, you know?
No.
And I understood the difference between being afraid of God and fearing him. I knew that his judgments were right and that his decisions were pure and based on righteousness. So when he asked me to do something, I knew to get it done.
So was there any point in time in dismantling the police force that did you second guess pursuing that just kind of due to the climate at the time? You know, because that was a strong move.
When I dismantled the police force, I was riding around with 4 guns and a shotgun in my car in a 3-piece suit. Because they didn't just go away. You just don't get rid of the police.
Right, right.
But I say this all the time, and I hope you have some brothers listening to me.
For sure.
If I would have been outside and they were killing George Floyd, brother, I would have hurt someone. And I don't care if I would have had to give up my life. I would have done this as mayor.
Yeah, because that's people now. I mean, people will grab their iPhone and record it instead of helping the brother.
I'm not grabbing an iPhone. I'm gonna get a good sprint going, and I'm gonna lay everything I got into your body, officer.
Now let me ask you this: how is it that music has affected the youth in a way that makes them have a higher proclivity towards, you know, drugs and the street life, but at the same time, there's a point of being scary too. Like, you know, these younger guys, they're not, you know, gonna fight. You know, they use a gun more as a shield. You know, because they're afraid of physical altercation. And so how do those two dichotomies exist together with, you know, on one side is, you know, I'm a gangster, I'm a thug because of the music that I'm listening to, but on the other side you have this actual inner insecurity and weakness. Like how can that reside in the same place?
Because fear is a manifestation of one's circumstance. You don't become afraid just on you don't walk around afraid naturally. Your circumstances invoke in you a response of fear. Therefore, when I get or I become afraid, I go into a defense mechanism mode. And if I can't fight, my defense is this pistol. But what I try to tell these youngsters all the time, and I hope you're listening to me, way out there in KC. Brother, there's some monsters walking around here that don't care if you have a gun. They will snatch that gun from you. And all you got to do is live long enough to go to prison. Because when you go to prison, there are no guns. There is no shade. There's no shadow. You are who you are. You can't go get nothing. And, there's cats that have been in there 25, 30 years. They got 24-inch arms, bench pressing 550, and they don't care. You're going to be who you are. So you having a weapon ain't going to alter the situation. And so before you get into that situation, you got to remember what I said. My guiding lights have always been my fear of God and my love of knowledge. I love to be known, to know what I'm dealing with. And I like to let God guide me in my understanding of what I'm learning. Do you understand what I'm saying? I say this all the time. Black men struggle with two things. We don't hate white people, we hate racism. But if you hear us talking about racism, they'll say you hate white people. And once you are identified as a hater of white people, you got no chance in this system. So you have to comport yourself in such a way that when you articulate your feelings, you leave no room for doubt. I don't hate white folk. I hate some of the things they do. And if you stop doing what you're doing, then all of my hatred is gone, because as a human being, I love you. As my fellow human, I love you. But I'm not going to let my love for you as a human allow you to misuse me. And it's the same thing here on these streets. The fear that these youngsters have of getting killed has overwhelmed their opportunity and ability to simply say, hey, brother, are me and you cool? Are we all right, brother?
Yeah.
Because that right there can save your life. Just walking up to a dude that people are saying y'all both have animosity, and you may not have any animosity. Right. Instead of me going to get a pistol, I walk up to you and say, hey, bro, hey, blood, hey, cuz, you cool, man? You cool with me? Yeah, I'm cool with you. Okay, brother, because I'm cool with you, man. And that's all it is. But fear will not allow for that. And what keeps that fear factor going? It is the culture, the music, the lyrics, the words. You thinking that this cat's walking around thinking about blasting because that's all he's talking about. And you in your bedroom rapping and talking about blasting and killing and murder. He knows that's what you're talking about. So where's the possibility of communication?
So if you were able to, just in your perfect world with all of your perspective, because hindsight is 20/20, and so I know you've gained a lot from your experiences. And here in Kansas City, we're dealing with a high murder rate currently, now. What things do you think could really change that in our community? I know we've talked about the music being an influence. We've talked about, just kind of the past culture, bleeding over into now. But what things would you change from your vantage point that you feel could help this picture overall?
The thing that helped change Compton the fastest is when I started hiring Crips, Pirus, and Vatos.
Hold on, wait a minute, wait, because I wasn't expecting that. So the change was when you started hiring some of the gang members, and in what roles and in what way did that help?
I would give them the hardest work there was.
Okay.
And I would roll up to them and say, man, I bet y'all can't get all these trees cut in 2 hours. And I come back in 2 hours later, it's done. And then what happens is, if they start working together, they start needing each other. Because how can we complete the task unless we work together? Right?
Yeah.
And that worked with the Mexican gangbangers too. I was running so much game on them. I said, man, city staff say y'all can't clear this whole field in a day. Yes, we can. Oh, come on, man. Y'all can't. Man, them cats be out there working 2 or 3 hours overtime. We don't need no pay. Can't nobody tell us what we can't do.
So it's kind of like a forced cooperation type of situation until.
Yes, that they knew I loved them. I mean, I'd show up on some of these job sites with the gangbangers, and man, I have a truck full of food. What y'all doing, man? While we work, Mr. Bradley. Okay, check this out. Take about an hour and a half off. I got some steak and French fries.
Right, but do you think that it helped you kind of growing up in that neighborhood and that environment, not being afraid, and so you could connect with them and approach them, whereas maybe a mayor who grew up in under different circumstances would have been afraid to even interact with them in that way? Do you think that that gave you an advantage?
Absolutely. But the other thing that I was fearless. So we had a gang in Compton called the 7 O's. They were like the most bitterly contested Mexican gang in town. And I went straight to them and said, man, come to my house Friday. And they were like, man, we don't even know where you live, but here's my address, come. So they walked into my house. Man, I had food everywhere. I had people everywhere. Hey, y'all the honored guests, come on in. I had my jacuzzi on. I had food laying out everywhere, and I had bought the fight. I don't remember who was fighting, but it was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And they just couldn't. Their phone would ring, and people calling them. I never forget, one of them's name was Chopper. And they was like, where you at, man? I'm at the mayor's house. Huh? You lying? No, man, I'm at the mayor's house. You want to talk to him? Mr. Mayor, this is my homie. He don't believe I'm at your house. Okay, put him on the phone. Yeah, man, I'm over here. You want my address? Because, see, I treated them as human beings. Whether they were Crip, Piru, Vato, it don't matter, because I know how I want to be treated. Right. And the first thing I want is I want to be able to take care of myself.
No.
I mean, bro,
oh, you muted. Okay, I hear you now.
I mean, you give me a job and let me take care of myself. That's 99.9% of manhood. To be able to take care of yourself. So the man that gives me the opportunity to take care of myself has opened the door. He ain't going to teach me how to be a man, but he's opened the door for me to become a man. It's up to me to step through the door, grasp the opportunity, and guess what? When I see other men like me, other men that were shooting at me last week, but now we're throwing roofing shingles to each other, trying to get this roof on top of, because I was creative, and I'd love to come where you guys are. I mean, I had a program called Operation Redirection where I took up all the boarded up homes that was in Compton. I told the federal government, give them to me, gave them to me. I took all the gangbangers. I said, we're going to fix these houses. I brought in some older men to teach them how to do roofing, drywall, shingles, tile, air conditioning. We took 2-bedroom homes, turned them into 4- and 5-bedroom homes. And then some of those guys turned around and bought those homes because now they got a skill. Now they know how to be a roofer. They know how to be a painter. They know how to do electricity. They know how to do drywall. And
so how can we get into this early? Because so there's a couple mentorship groups here, and I'm in talks with a couple of them as far as developing different programs for the youth. What makes up a good mentorship program that could keep a young man on the straight and narrow? Like what would be some good elements? Say this
to you, and I don't mean any disrespect to mentor programs.
No, none taken.
I didn't mentor them. Mm-hmm. I said, look, you want to work? This is how it's gonna go. Be here on time, do your job, and I'm gonna pay you.
So it's more about resources.
Man, if you decide you're gonna take your whole check and buy some crack, you're gonna be hungry at work next week, because that's your lunch money. See, we began to teach them what it was to be a man, and manhood is not a nice thing. You know, when you get your check, you got to start splitting that money up if you're a man. How much going to the kids' clothes?
Right.
How much going to the shoes? How much going to lunch money? How much is going to the savings account? How much is going to the checking account? Manhood is not an easy process. And when you just teach them manhood, which is, hey, bro, you got your check. I hope you put some of that in the bank, dog. I hope you took care of your child support, dog. I hope you bought groceries home for your children. And I got to know them. I got to know their kids. I got to know a lot of them didn't have wives, but they had babies' mamas. And I tell them, if this fool ain't taking care of business, call me. And it's a funny thing when the mayor roll up to your job, hop out the car, finger you and say, "Hey man, come in, let me holler at you, man."
Man, that's mentorship. That's mentorship.
Well, see, I don't call it that because
You don't call
sometimes
it
sometimes I tell them, "Look here, Rollo, you know I'll jump on you too, man." You know what I'm saying?
That probably helped, man. They know you throwing around 400 pounds on the bench press.
Man, it was love. I have worked at funerals where the Pirus have taken over the funeral. The preacher called me. I fall in there with 5 or 6 good men, and the dudes just put their cigarettes out, sit down, be quiet. And it wasn't because they thought I was going to whoop them. It was because they knew I expected more from them.
Yeah, you see, it's a conversation that we actually had on the live stream here a couple days back, and it was about the conviction that a person can relay to someone that they're trying to help based on if they've been through a scenario or if they haven't. You know what I'm saying? And it was kind of my stance that a person who's lived a perfect life, it's kind of hard for you to take their advice because it's like, you know, where's this coming from?
But
you haven't experienced it.
Right?
Right. And so what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that a person who's actually gone through the experiences is a little better able to help, or can those experiences be a distraction for the person?
That's a hard question, because Christ lived a perfect life and he changed the world. So that's an example of someone who does not do wrong that can teach righteousness. The problem with trying to teach righteousness is the Bible tells us not one. God looked over, around, and through the earth, and he didn't find one that was righteous. So that's why he had to do what he did. I got to make a new man, a new Adam. So none of us are righteous. But now, if you've had some experiences in life when you had to make the decision as to whether or not I'm going to go to this party, go kick it with my homeboy, buy me some new shoes, new hat, new clothes, some real good fragrance, spent about $150, $200. Back in my day, that was a lot of money. Nothing to you youngsters now.
Right.
Or do I go home and buy some Infamil and some Pampers? Well, I'm going to choose the Pampers and the Infamil if I understand that I am responsible for this baby that I made. But how do I know I'm responsible for him if my daddy wasn't responsible for me? In circumstances like that, you have to have a spiritual change. It can't be physical, right? So look at the story, and I'm not preaching, but
you muted.
I had a call come in, and I just had to knock it out. What should I do to get it back?
Oh, you good? I hear you now. Yep.
I'm having a meeting of black men at my house, and they calling to see if the meeting is on. Right?
Gotcha.
So now I'm not the mayor.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I'm not the mayor, but I'm still bringing black men together. And we sit down and rap, and we talk about what we got to do to make a change. But let me give you this example. I'm an old cat. So Lazarus dies. And basically his sister says, well, had you been there, Lord, my brother wouldn't be dead. Well, the reason why Jesus weeps is because you must not know I'm Jesus, girl. So if you knew I'm Jesus, you wouldn't be crying, because watch this. Come here, Lazarus. Get up.
Right.
So much of our problem is we lack the faith to accomplish the things that we think are impossible. And when we think things are impossible and we act faithless, we get a faithless outcome. So when I see a built up building, everybody ride by and say, look at that burnt up building. And I ride by and say, look at that classroom for these gangbangers to learn how to fix it.
Right.
The most profound political statement you've ever heard was this. Some people see things and say, why? I look at things and say, why not?
Seeing the possibilities.
And that liberation there makes you powerful. Now, it's going to make you a lot of enemies too.
Right.
Because nobody wants the man with the answer.
Man, that's beautiful. Now, I definitely I appreciate your time. I know you got something going on there, so you're gonna have to leave here in a second. Tell us a little bit about the documentary you're working on, Piru Genesis. What's that all about?
I'm working on a documentary to give brothers who are in Arkansas hollering Piru an opportunity to understand you ain't no Piru boy. And it's not an insult to you.
No.
You didn't have to become a Piru. These cats had to Piru because they lived on Piru Street. Piru Street's only 54 houses. How can 54 houses change a whole world? You got Pirus in South Africa. You got Pirus in Chicago. What is that, man? How could something negative go so far and something positive can't even get off the corner?
Oh my man, listen, that's my I think about that every day. When it comes to even building a positive platform. And not just this one. If you go on YouTube, you pull up anything positive, the view count is fairly low. Nobody's really talking about it. And you can find the most ratchet, insignificant mess. And that's what everybody's talking about, And so it's kind of hard to persevere in trying to change the mindset of the culture when you have a culture who doesn't want to change. And so it's difficult.
They do want to change. They don't know how. And then change into what? I mean, they've got a whole bunch of things that they got brothers changing into, man. Mm-hmm. They got a lot of brothers changing. There's a lot of brothers got wigs on and high heels now. And so that's an opportunity to change. You feel me? But you can't allow anybody else to create your options or write your narrative.
But see, we're so brainwashed at this point because all of us have the greatest library ever created right in the palm of our hand. So at any time you can hop on Google and find whatever information it is that you're seeking. But for some reason, we choose to seek out information that destroys us instead of heals us.
Okay, so why is weed legal now?
Industry, money, taxes.
Keep these Negroes high. And you have to understand it. And you had black people fight. Man, we can make a lot of money with that weed. Well, Negro, you can also destroy a whole bunch of opportunities. You can also destroy a whole bunch of hope. You can also destroy a whole bunch of young people's mind because they ain't ready for it. And which gangster ain't going to sell it to the 13-year-old when he all about the paper? And see, when you start
what state is that? One of the states they just legalized everything.
Money,
right.
Brother, they teach us to worship money, and Jesus told you it's the root of all evil. I'm not telling people not to go get your money. I'm telling you to go get the money where you ain't hurting nobody else. And listen, I will turn down some money if I got to hurt somebody. Because I understand that there's more to this life than money. But I also know that opportunity to get money creates choices. And what we got to give these young black men and brown men and white men, because guess what? They're going to be gang banging soon. Just like they rapping, they're going to start banging. Trust me. Because once evil is loose, you can't contain it. Evil has no containment unit, brother. And you look and say, well, where did iced tea come from? Vanilla Ice come from? And where did Eminem come from? Well, the same place they came from, that's where the white Crips and Pirus is going to come from. In fact, you already got them. I have done legal cases as an expert on Piru culture, and the Pirus are from Utah. They Mormons. So, see, the cure to the ills of mankind have no color to them. They based on the issues of the heart.
Right.
What do you want with life? And if you do want something with life, how do I create the road by which you can travel to your dream? Now, that's what a good man will do. A good man will say, I saved $7 million with the Compton Police Department bringing in the sheriffs. What am I going to do with that $7 million? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create job training programs so the Pirus, the Crips, and the Vatos can work together. And then murder will go from 135 a year down to 17.
But unfortunately, we had too many politicians. When you create that slush fund, now it's time to create a bill with a bunch of extra stuff
with
in.
A bunch of contractors that can meet
development deals and deals where you get a little money under the table and all that kind of thing. And so politics is very crooked game.
But brother AL, we are sucker for a nice face and a smooth voice and a nice suit. Man, good politicians. Listen, I'm a Shakespearean laureate, brother. My major is English. I just talk hood because I know that's a language that people can understand.
Right.
I have like degrees of the yang. They mean nothing if I can't communicate with people and get them to understand me. But what I'm saying is the better politician, the one that really understands what's going on, oftentimes he is not going to appear the way you want him to. And that was Jesus's problem. Jesus was not from the religious class. So here he comes with a doctrine that is the truth. It is the light. It is salvation. But they rejected him because he didn't sound like how they wanted.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. You know, it's
He didn't
important
look like where they wanted them to look. Had other Sadducees. He didn't have gold.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people focus too much on the messenger versus the message, you know, which is really the most important part.
Oftentimes, what you want doesn't look like what you want it to look like. You know, I tell these sisters all the time, y'all looking for Prince Charming, and all these cats walking around here may not look like princes, but they are charming. Give them a chance. You know, we got so many false gods in our life. I don't want no man that ain't got no, you know, CDs or five. Is you crazy? At 12 o'clock at night when somebody's trying to break the door in, any man will do. You understand what I'm saying? My wife has never got up to check on the noises outside. I won't even let her lay down, baby. I got this.
So do you think men have kind of lost their sense of purpose in all of this? Men have just lost their sense of purpose?
Man, if you try to be a real man in this society, boy, these women come after you. They call
so how do we regain that?
Well, if I told you on television, I'd get in trouble. But, you know, but the bottom line, brother, is this. You know, one thing for sure, my sisters know, my son know, my daughter knows, my cousins know, everybody know. If somebody bothers you, call Uncle Omar, because I'm coming.
Man, well, listen, I'm gonna be out there in Compton here in a couple months, man. So we definitely have to get together. And you still pumping iron? You still pumping iron?
Every day.
Every day.
But y'all come for every day. You know,
man, I'm trying to go out to CT Fletcher's gym.
Well, I mean, I ain't into it like that no more. I got to tell you,
Okay.
I had a heart attack. I had cancer twice, tuberculosis. But here's the deal. I don't want to get super huge anymore. I'm trying to stay, you know, 290. You know what I'm saying?
All right.
If I start buffing iron, I get 330 and can't wear my clothes. But this is what I wanted to say, brother, before we close. I'm praying for y'all. And I'm praying that God give you the light and the energy and the resources to touch the hearts of those that need to be touched, so that they will understand that life is more than just a notion. You got a purpose in life. God does not give you life without purpose, and it ain't to be shooting at each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes,
and it's
sir.
not. And tell the gangbangers, if we take death out your game, what would you have to bang for? You wouldn't have nothing to do.
Yeah.
You feel me? If we take killing out of gang banging, you out of a job, dog. You be just sitting around watching TV in your blue or your red. And death never produces life. You feel me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay,
sir.
Brother. God bless you.
Man, I appreciate having you on, man. I really do. The replay, for those of you who are tuning in or possibly came in the middle, the replay will be on the Elevating Men YouTube page, or you can go to the Elevating Men Facebook page. And then, Brother Bradley, again, just really quick, when is the documentary set to be released? I know you're still working on it, but is there an anticipated?
We're trying to have it. We're trying to have it ready for June. We have a couple of interviews left. We are interviewing a Crip who probably was like third in command from Tookie and Raymond, Washington. We have to come to Kansas to interview him. He lives there. And we have a Piru who did 43 years in prison for murder. He's just released. And of course, when you talk to these cats now, after the bumps and bruises that they've endured, they got a totally different mindset.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, we'll talk a little more, but I definitely want to get these stories in front of the young men here in Kansas City. So I'm trying to do all that I can to, really just elevate the idea of taking control of our lives as men, and just being better, just being better overall. And so it really starts with these types of conversations for men like you who have experience and wisdom, And you've done a lot with your life, a lot of positive, a lot of good. You've been attacked unjustifiably, but you've stood as a man. You stood in your manhood, you stood in your position, and that's why you're still here today. And so definitely appreciate you and salute you.
Well, don't let me let you get away without giving you some accolades, but I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing. Don't be discouraged because, see,
Yes, sir.
you can do good all day long and the news will never show up. But the day you do bad, you'll have every channel there. But
Sure.
do good anyway. So I'm proud of you, AL. May God continue to richly bless you, expand your flock of people who watch you. And, brother, keep on keeping up.
I appreciate that. I received that. I received that, brother. Well, you have a good evening. All of you who are watching, thanks for tuning in. Definitely share this with your network. A lot of good information in here. And we'll be back again Monday for the men's panel. You don't want to miss that. Again, this is A.L. Johnson with Elevated Men. Thank you and have a good evening.